So, DigiNEST is a reading group and a place for creative exploration that I established with Jesse about half a year ago. We made it because me and other people in the community have consistently had interest in it's under the broader banner of society, ethics, and tech under JOPRO.
Mm.
And specifically for me, I made it as a place to both hold me accountable and build community around discussing the cutting edge in terms of generative AI, uh, VR, other immersive technologies, and ethics, theory, and technology as related to those topics. It's been running every week, and it's been something that has helped inform me a lot about AI and helped motivate me towards different projects in relation to such. A lot also with VR and coding in general.
Yeah. Um, and and it what you kind of see here is like the public facing discussion series, really good version of it. There's also some like projects being brewed up. When I call something a program in JoPro, it's because there's some like actual structured thing people can do or see, or that is producing some output like this. So this is like we're hosting this on purpose, which I think is like a nice. I'm as a little personal flavor to it, I'm very happy that Avery's both doing that and Avery's journey of being very interested in things for a long time, and now we're kind of slowly building a bit more artifacts around it. Avery's been writing more and has a Substack and writing other things and exploring forums, and we're making these sort of visible things to do. But yeah, I'm really appreciative for Avery kind of like coming along with me to do this, because I'm like, I've been trying to get Avery into like, okay, let's get Avery some structural thing to do and have some ownership over and develop, and it has been. We've been doing this for about 7 months, and Molly's been a wonderful co-host for that too. She's had to handle some things, but it's been a wonderful experience with
Yeah.
us three, and having some guests now too, more regularly is really nice as well.
I think the name and the logo is sort of like a middle meeting ground between Jesse and I's aesthetics and inspirations as well. We're
I think the logo is 100% you, but yes, the name
okay,
maybe me.
no, there was an initial version of it that was a lot cuter, and you struck that down.
Yeah. I know your preferred aesthetic, but it
We
didn't quite. Yeah.
it's I think the result is pretty like mature and like creative and like professional. um,
That's that
I
you can
think
see why like it's grouped with his other stuff that's like, oh, serious and rock letters, and then it's like
I
this stuff.
comp
So
com compared to the original design, that is very serious.
yeah.
The original was looking like Tamagotchi.
Right. And that's not quite, you know. It's a
But
one of
yeah, I mean
like
that also reflects my
yeah.
goals for the group anyways. I'm interested in and I chose the name partially because I'm inspired. Okay, like it is a reference to Digimon, just to be point blank. Like the name, like in terms of the naming, which I'm inspired by things about like how can we connect soft experiences of human connection, flourishing, and the desire for character growth and companionship alongside serious, introspective, and analytical learning and creativity. So that's the origins of the group.
Yeah. And like there's a this isn't kind of just like, oh, Avery being like, oh, let's do this. Like to give it a little bit more credit, like I'm going to show this. Like we've been at Oxford Internet Institute as part of the Inclusive Gaming Conference, where we presented plot twisters and some of the co-design work that we've done there. We've invested a lot of time into plot twisters as an organization, which is centered around a lot of these principles, not just cozy games, but more, let's say, holistic or affirming efforts of how we make how we're working as a group, no less designing technology, no less all these things here that you can read. Um, and I don't think the actual website is quite open anymore. But it was a really wonderful experience. That's actually for those, yeah, like this website expired. but I still have like the pamphlet from it and all the work we did to make that. I was there with Y2K, who's another Plot Twisters member and kind of loosely affiliated with, done some JOPRO related stuff as well. And Amanda, who actually just joined the server, is Amanda Curtis, Amanda Nicole Curtis, who is like a um, organizer of this conference. She's doing tons of cool stuff still at Oxford Internet Institute. She does a lot with gaming specifically. So I could see her very easily joining us um, to do things here more directly too. And I'll look at the Plot Twisters website and everything else. But yeah, there's a very nice momentum and history there, and kind of like this is sort of JOPRO's like slightly more structural, slightly more institutional, slightly more academic-y looking group that kind of is supporting that stuff. So to that end,
A lot of the ethos,
okay.
a lot of the ethos from Plot Twisters carry over in terms of challenging, dominating ways of relation and organization, and also about the interest in oftentimes undervalued direct experience of compassionate human relation and the
Social cultural considerations you might have said in the past.
yeah. Also, by the way, we will be doing this every week. We decided to make introduction for the future.
Yeah, and because many folks like people are ready to ask about this like in the other cohort programs that are going on in JOPRO. So I appreciate like Avery playing along with that. So this will be a nice thing to show them. But yes, so I think we're here. Shout out to Molly, who's not with us. You guys see this. Very briefly, I'll go through this fantastic diagram of the JOPRO campus map. Basically, we kind of emerged from Orthogonal Research Education Laboratory. There's some other programs here. I can't really zoom in as well as I'd like to right here, but you can see like these the black text here are basically some of the programs we have going. The gold text are certain working groups. DigiNEST is basically associated through Society Ethics Tech. It's a working group on its own, or a program and a discussion series on its own. And that's loosely how these things relate. Go more. We could, if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. But I'm kind of just having here as a very broad visual representation of how JOPRO relates to Orthogonal Lab, OpenWorm, DevoWorm, which is his own group on model organisms like C. elegans, and also the Open Source Summer Cohort itself. So with that in mind, why don't you tell us about what we've been doing so far, Avery, if you would please to do that.
Since then, I and the other members of the group have selected different papers that reflect the ethos and focuses of the group. Some of the interesting ones were a reflective agency. Was one that covered reflective agency framework. It actually explored a lot of different AI journaling apps and similar kinds of applications that, and including some of which only exist on paper in terms of like college trials and academic exploration, academic papers, and not necessarily all that were commercially available. So it's really interesting to like get an overview about like what exists there in terms of AI assisted reflection, and it offered a framework for evaluating how AI assisted learning could assist with human autonomy rather than overtake it. We also covered one that sort of synthesized multiple different moral evaluation frameworks and scenario and test scenarios and applied them to different popular commercial LLMs. There's also a one that talked about an quantifiable and consistent way to prompt AI to get consistent big five scores, and looking at how they would be acting in scenarios. So that's only a small, that's roughly maybe a third of what we've read so far. And I think it's been really interesting to get a broad overview over the current state of LLMs. Though I don't want our what we read to only be limited to LLMs in the future. I think there's been a lot to explore there in terms of how are people using it now? What are ways that we can evaluate, improve, and measure their current performance of different things that are going to hugely impact human well-being and like, ways the society will be organized in the future?
I think it's been a
And
nice. Okay.
oh, that's I'm always about that.
I think it's been a. I basically started in the JOPRO Discord. There's a kind of a discussion forum that's in the community section open, and I basically renamed that. It used to be just be called DigiNEST, but I basically so people could understand a bit more. It's like a lot of the intra and interpersonal aspects of agents and also human computer interaction. I think that's sort of where this is focused, and that's unique in JOPRO relative to like Cognition Futures is a bit more like straight cognitive science, psychology, um, theory work, and we have a nice group doing that. There's also Jen here is doing a master's of social work student and a JOPRO co-founder. We're looking at like mental health stuff, like in a more clinical in social work, in clinical psychology, clinical therapy senses. And then this is the most like actually combined technology impact on human as well. Like things in Google Summer of Code are not at all this like totally not really human computer related. Some of them are. Some of them like VR for education and whatnot. But this is the most integrative in that sense. And then data indirection has some potential overlap, but is more not as targeted as this is. So I really appreciate having this group and Avery working to kind of flesh it out um, to that end.
So
Yeah. I changed the
we have a
slide on
broad.
you. So do you want me to talk about this one?
Sure, go for it.
I changed the slide a little bit, and you might not have seen the changes because it was a little yeah. So I think this is basically reference to sort of Molly had a very interesting idea that actually would have combined with a previous data and direction intern's work. A previous intern was working on sort of making a guide, and we did make it. It just hasn't fully been published yet. Basically, a guide for K through 12 parents and like deal how do you deal with AI in the classroom? What should you know? And as someone who folks who may not be the most tech literate, it was very much um uh a kind of a primer on how do you know what should happen in not should happen, but like what questions should you ask? What should you be aware of if you're seeing this pushed on in your classroom, and how do you talk about it and things like that. And she was very interested in like impact on children and how parents could be aware of that. So that's sort of a foundation from the back. And then Molly, who's our co-host, who isn't here today, was had originally a broad idea about like best practices for dealing with LLMs at large, like kind of a similar thing, but maybe less targeted towards K through 12 and parents there, but more what should an everyday person need to know about dealing with LLMs and whatnot, which is kind of a nice nexus point for a lot of things. And then and I don't know how you initially situate these two, Avery, but I think either that evolved into or just a separate thing was like all the different impacts, like looking at these like both benchmarks, but just ways to understand economic, ecological, social impacts, and sort of creating either maybe a combined frameworks or different ways of just how do you understand the massive realm of implications and impacts and downstream things, uh, making nuanced and ethical choices about generative AI impact. So I don't know if you have any.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as we were talking about the primer, we basically realized that like part of why it's difficult to talk about AI now is that it applies to so many domains societally, and there are a lot of people pushing agendas about different ways to interpret it. And
Yes.
we wanted to find what's the best way to like break this down to an evidence-based approach that tries to avoid being prescriptive, but rather just offer people this information to make choices based on their values and what they think is reasonable. And that's that. Well, that's my angle on it. I don't think it's exactly Molly's, though. I think she was very interested in also taking an evidence-based approach and having a place that showed nuance and care in how to interpret the data
It might be a good
available.
time to also mention a little bit more about each of our three backgrounds as co-hosts. I know we should have done this. Maybe I'll just clip this out and put it in the front. But Molly has a very interesting background on trust, as in humans trusting interactions and outputs with AI. And she's studied this in her university, and also it's part of her job, um, her professional environment as one where she's dealing with human computer interaction and trust and what affects trust and decisions and things like that. So she's a very interesting background, and also like cognitive science type stuff too. Um, I don't know if you want to say anything, Avery, to that end.
I
Kind of
mean,
already
I have
did.
a background in data, philosophy, and art. I think that shows up in my approaches.
Yeah.
I have very much like interdisciplinary approaches, and I'm very much drawn towards the intersections of like direct feeling and interpersonal insight combined with rigor and careful structure analysis of information.
Yeah, and I will mention that if you ever need a theory about anything that's happening, particularly as it affects people, um, Avery is your person. And I appreciate that about Avery very much. I think Avery has a lot to offer the world in terms of giving space to do that, and that's part of why this group exists too. My background is very diverse, non-traditional. Um, I did not have a direct path towards anything, and now I am doing a lot and doing a lot of things that I care about in a nice way. I have a master's in data science. I was at one time a physics major, one time a business major. I've changed my mind about those things. Those had the person I showed you was someone my classmate when I was an international relations and global political economy major. That was a long time ago. And then I was like, you know what? I kind of want to go into technology. And then I met I met Molly. I met Avery and Molly for the first time, both in New York City. Avery was for a psychology nerdy meetup. And then similar, I think the same year, a few months later, I met Molly at my first ever like technology event, which was NYU's Ethics of AI event at New York University. We always crossed paths there, and also happened to meet someone else, Dan Elson, who was a local friend at the time. And it was my beginnings of like, okay, ethics and technology. I hit some really famous, like there was like Jan LeCun and Peter Norvig and Stuart Russell, all these like big names in the AI, like people who write the textbooks and whatnot. I totally hit one of those guys with my book bag, not knowing who they were. When I was rushing into, oh, the lecture's like, oh, sorry, and I smashed somebody with my book bag. It was kind of funny in retrospect to realize, that's my biggest claim to AI fame is that. But it's been a really winding road since then. I joined orthogonal lab. I've done a lot of interdisciplinary research. I formed some working groups. I've done things in cognitive science. We've hosted things at big events. We've gotten published in nice places. And now I'm running things like this because I want there to be more of this and more things like data and direction and more things like society, ethics, tech, and other stuff in the world. So I'm kind of a researcher, but also sort of a research. I don't want to use the word entrepreneur, but strategist, let's say. And I'm trying to develop folks into build them up so they can do useful things in the world in many ways. So that's background about us. I know we're kind of really doing a lot of intro, so I apologize for that, but it's important
I
to do this
I associate Jesse a lot with
trouble.
career.
No.
Yes, that too, but also sometimes good, sometimes bad. But primarily, I associate Jesse nowadays what he's up to in terms of like career direction toward people interested in knowledge work from a critical, socially critical, and interdisciplinary and counter hegemonic lens. That seems to be how I've experienced Jesse the last year.
I think that's fair. And so yeah, let's go on to other project and things that are happening here. I think we kind of covered some of this, but
Yeah,
yeah.
this is kind of like what Avery got up to.
Yeah.
This fight basically that. Yeah, this has been an interesting jumping point for me to see how different LLM setups work, and motivated me to explore different agent agentic workflows. I've been streaming a lot of open LangGraph. I've also been I've been looking into exploring vector steering and looking and had tried to apply concepts from different papers for my own experiments with LM prompts and my desire and how I can healthily reflect using AI as an aid that does not override my own autonomy or dilute my own choice or awareness. Uh, my next, I think a couple projects I'm currently working on setting up are I have a project called I have a theory called Allostatic Kinds. Without getting too much into it, just to give the
Had it ready
briefest
to go.
briefest overview.
Here we go. And I got the
It is a
diagram too. So here,
it's a description of basically a philosophical backing for first principles explanation of why people might split part processing of ourselves in the world into four intuitive pieces. Colloquially, this would be like heart, mind, body, spirit, but I call it emotion, volition, schemas, consumption. Um, I'm interested in whether that might be usefully mapped onto the way that the latent spaces in LLMs represent concepts. I'm still in the very early stages of it, but something that's exciting for me. I'm also interested in agent-based modeling based off that concept and different kinds and those different strategies for regulation. Some of which are heading more towards video gamey potentials about representing an interesting pseudo biological agent, and some of which are heading more towards demonstrating potential academic ideas. Very early stages, but something I'm excited about exploring more and would like to do so
yeah,
in DigiNEST as well.
there's between this this one, which doesn't have a description there yet, we can work that out, and the allostatic kinds in general, and then a lot of the multi-agent stuff we might get into later. Like there's really cool. I love the phrasing of like asymmetrical or non-uniform internal weights and preferences of agents and how that affects a lot of stuff, kind of the diagram and everything else. So if I'm sure the direct audience has heard Avery talk about that some, and anybody's interested in that viewing this later, just join Discord or find Avery, and there's a lot to talk about that. So
I'm
we'll come
very
back
chatty and friendly,
most
as you can't tell.
most of the time, yeah. Unless you have,
I'm not. Yeah.
much more so than me. So how about that? Let's go to yeah, and I threw in this. I forgot I did this. Um, Before we get to the future of DigiNES, I'll just throw out a couple things here. I mentioned most of this, but in the top right, I put. Am I sharing that? Yeah. In the top right, this is a recent discussion in one of the chats. Um, Logan Frost came up earlier today, as mentioned by Morgan, about um, theory of mind for agents, and like cool stuff there that's related to something that Alicia's working on and her thing she's proposing too. So we have people looking at frameworks, we have people looking at policy and econ and benchmarks, we have community engagement, where many of us, well, mostly me, but many people in a couple people in the JOPRO community are frequent attenders of the MIT AHA Advancing Humans with AI program seminar series, which is a fantastic free uh, twice a month on Thursdays place talking about pretty much everything in the DigiNES space. Yeah, people looking at personalities in chatbots. You have uh, we had people from Google and education stopping by. I'm not affiliated with it. I'm a big fan of it. And I want to support what AHA's doing, because I think they're one of the better groups in the planet that's looking at the things that DigiNest and related folks are working out. And I mentioned the multi-agent stuff. I'm trying to get a meeting together with all of us to talk about that soon, and the JOPRO map. So cool. Future of DigiNEST. You can go with that.
I think I'm interested in finding more papers about emerging technologies, particularly if they have interesting societal or intra or interpersonal implications. I also would like for this to be a space that's encouraging and unthreatening for exploring novel or interesting artistic or scholarly pursuits, especially in relation to those topics.
Yeah.
I think that I think that's something I would like to talk more with both Oka and Ying. I know both of them personally. I'd be curious to hear about if they have any topics or projects, or they don't need to. It's totally fine. The group is totally open to people who just want to come and talk about topics from a socially critical and interpersonally motivated lens. But yeah, I also want to be a space that's friendly towards encouraging people towards its game skills or exploring interests of theirs that are related to emerging technologies.
Yeah. And that's not like that's absolutely Avery's ethos, and that's why I'm partnering with Avery on this stuff and other things. And it's also a core of many of the organizations that we're JOPRO's partnered with, and JOPRO itself, like to be uh, a little cheesy for a moment. Like this is why I made this its own thing here. Like particularly in these spaces, I find one there's a broad lack of legitimate, like there aren't any experts that are going to come in and save the day and like solve. No one's going to come along and just solve stuff. Like we're going to have to build a lot of it ourselves. So my approach to many of these things here are we need to give people the space to, especially caring people who are taking information from non-hegemonic or marginalized spaces, yes, but regardless of that, even like it's a contentious, hostile environment to come and try to talk about technology right now, especially with an ethical lens, especially with a constructive lens, especially if it's not going to the extreme of extreme utopia or extreme doom, and you're trying to do something in the messy middle. I think that's a very particular space that needs cultivation and community building and all these things that I've listed here. So that's a uh, I appreciate that's I didn't uh, bribe Avery to say that. I think that that's Avery's own personal beliefs, and I think Molly would basically be aligned with that too. I won't speak for her if she's not here, but
I think it's a
she's signed
I
up.
think it's a big part of what I think it's a big part of why we remain friends for so long, despite the fact that we appear like a pretty fun set of friends. Someone
Yeah.
I remember when we were in the UK and someone pointed out how we look like cartoon characters, like cartoon character foils
Oh
next to each
yeah.
other.
Oh, especially when you were like deep in London. Yeah, yeah. Uh, did like did Claudia or somebody say that? I don't know. I don't. Was that like a passing by?
I think it was Eve.
Okay, that's cool. There's a nice picture of Charlotte and Eve and us at dinner that reminds me of. So I want to find that now. But yes, point being, to be very theatrical in my own sense, I know that we need more people who are trained and developed to do um, meaningful things in the world and engage the battlefield of tech BS that is thrust upon us. So a lot of my approach in professional development is getting people especially people that are sort of on the cusp of, oh, I don't know if I want to do research. I don't know if I can project. Like it's getting the people that are kind of on the cusp to engage, and then, how do you find a space to do it? How do you develop the voice? How do you develop skills? Those are like core things that I think are very serious and very underserved, let's say. I could go on and on and on about the inadequacy of existing programs and graduate programs to actually prepare people for the challenges that are being faced, both in terms of finding a job or in terms of just navigating the moment that we're in. But I will digress and go back to this. Yeah.
I will say, I'm not the most familiar with the inner workings of JOPRO diversity. However, I think that DigiNEST is probably one of the more less research. I mean, it's still research focused and encourages and it supports research. It's also very open and encouraging of artistic and exploration, particularly of emerging technology or such as VR, AI, etc.
Absolutely.
Just to also balance that out.
Yeah, and I'm not I don't need everybody to become a tech worker, but we're open to there's stories that I want to share that'll take too long to share, but I've had someone in a lot of very interesting spaces kind of reach out and we're working to do some very cool stuff in the fields that Avery has just alluded to. So anything on list on this slide? I think I have like one or two more slides and then we can be done. And
just to reiterate, we normally do just talk about the paper for most of the hour, so we probably will. I'll make it so that next week we'll talk about this paper, and later tonight I'll choose the paper for in a couple of weeks as well. So we will get a chance to talk about this paper in depth.
So yeah. Anything else on this slide, or are you kind of? I think you're good here.
I'm good.
Okay. Yep. I threw this in here as other things that are related. There's like a very much also a kind of ethnographic project on something in the way that I started a while ago and is very slowly being launched. And we're like, instead of soliciting people for submissions or interviews or artistic pieces around dealing with the moment that we're into that end, the Future Center is being launched, which is sort of a lot of mapping and understanding how technology and other spaces are being like what's going on in them, basically. I mentioned data and direction. There's also going to be an interesting year-end event that's going to, summer end event that's going to combine some other stuff that people can check out. They're interested in that too. And generally speaking, get involved. There's opportunities on the opportunities page. You can get in touch this way or whatever else for the people that are like, I think I want to join an internship for this stuff, or more formal roles. You can do that on those pages, or you can just reach out to me, etc. So I think that's it. That's the end of the presentation.